Synopsis of the book. Written by Jackie Ketra. Clara Hartwell is a 26-year-old woman living in a small yet busy city, juggling two demanding jobs as a babysitter by day and waitress at a night bar to make ends meet. Riven Thorne, once a formidable alpha of the Moonshadow pack, went rogue 5 years ago after a catastrophic incident that shattered his life. Now, 34, he lives a shadow of his former self, hiding his true identity under a fake name Joe and leading a life of obscurity and purposelessness, making a living by doing all kinds of dirty work for rich people and sleeping with women until one night that turned everything when unknowingly marked his one-night stand. None other than Clara Hartwell, setting off a chain of events that forced him back to his past. Chapter 1. Clara's POV.
I stood in the middle of the living room, the volume of 3 screaming kids, creating a chaotic symphony that felt like it might shatter my sanity. The din was almost enough to make my ears ring. Amid the chaos, one of the kids, a little girl with a wild mop of curls, shouted at me with an urgency that made me flinch. "Come on, bitch, I need to pee," she yelled, her face red and contorted with frustration. I let out a heavy sigh, muttering to myself, "Calm down, Clara. You've seen way worse than this, and you can get through it again." I tugged on a smile, trying to mask the exhaustion that was creeping into my bones. With a practiced calmness, I made my way to the little girl, bending down to her level. "All right, sweetheart, let's get you to the toilet," I said, trying to keep my tone soothing. As I closed the bathroom door behind her, I took a deep breath, my mind already shifting to the long shift I had ahead at the bar. The chaos of the evening was far from over, but I knew I'd face it with the same resilience that had seen me through so many other nights. As soon as the girl finished, I heard her yell from the bathroom, "Hey, bitch, I'm done." I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening into fists at my sides. I wasn't even sure where these kids had picked up such language, but it was starting to wear on me. I took another deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm as I opened the door. "All right, let's get you cleaned up," I said, keeping my voice as level as possible despite the frustration gnawing at me. I helped her wash her hands and wiped her face, silently praying for patience. When we were done, I led her back to the living room, the noise from the other 2 kids still echoing in the background. Once we were in the living room, I dropped down to her eye level, placing my hands on her small shoulders. "Listen, sweetie," I said firmly but softly. "What you just said to me wasn't good. You need to apologize." Her face scrunched up immediately, and she crossed her arms, stamping her foot for good measure. "No!" she yelled, her little voice filled with anger. "I won't!" I closed my eyes for a brief moment, murmuring under my breath, "This is exactly why I didn't want to take this job." Opening my eyes, I looked at her sternly. "I don't know where you learned to talk like that, but it's not okay," I said, my voice sharper now, though I kept it calm. "Calling people names, especially grown-ups, is disrespectful, and it has to stop." Her lips pressed into a pout, but I didn't let up. "You think it's funny or cool to act like this, but it's not. One day you're going to say something like that to the wrong person, and it's not going to end well. If you want to be treated with kindness and respect, you need to give it too. Got it?" The girl's face twisted, and before I knew it, she burst into tears, loud wailing cries that echoed through the entire room. Her sobs were quickly joined by her 2 siblings who seemed to take their cue from her. The sound was unbearable, and my head throbbed as I tried to figure out how to calm them down. Before I could do anything, the front door swung open, revealing their mother, her eyes wide with panic as she rushed in. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp with concern. Her gaze flicked between her screaming children and me. "What did you do to my kids?" she snapped, her tone accusing before I even had a chance to explain. I opened my mouth, trying to form the words to defend myself, but the little girl, still sniffling, beat me to it. "She said people don't like me because I'm a bad kid," she cried, her voice quivering with false innocence. My jaw dropped. "Wait, that's not what I—" Before I could finish, the woman's hand shot out, and I felt a sharp sting across my cheek. The slap was so sudden and fierce that my vision blurred for a second. My hand instinctively went to my face, my skin burning where she'd hit me. I stumbled backward, shocked and reeling, but before I could protest, she grabbed my arm roughly and shoved me toward the door. "This is exactly why I don't like black people," she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're all the same, annoying and trouble." I was too stunned to respond. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of humiliation and fury bubbling inside me, but words failed me. She stormed back inside, grabbing my handbag and jacket. She threw them at me, her face twisted with contempt. "Get off my property before I call the police on you," she barked, her voice as cold as ice. The door slammed shut behind me, and I found myself standing outside, dazed, my cheeks still stinging from the slap. Through the window, I saw the little girl smile at me, a cruel, satisfied grin that made my stomach turn. I sank down onto the ground, my hands trembling as I let out an awkward laugh, disbelieving. "What on earth just happened?" I muttered to myself, still in shock. The laughter felt wrong, hollow, but it was all I had in that moment as I sat there, stunned and utterly blindsided by how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. I sat there for a moment longer, letting the absurdity of the situation settle in. Then, with a deep breath, I pulled myself together and stood up, brushing off the dirt from my pants. Just as I got to my feet, a sudden rush of freezing water hit me from behind, drenching me. The sharp, pungent smell made me gag. It wasn't just water, it reeked of urine. I spun around to see who had done it, but all I caught was the sound of a door slamming shut from the next door. A shaky breath escaped my lips as I tried to swallow the anger and disgust that welled up inside me. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. I clenched my fists, forcing myself not to cry, refusing to break. Instead, I straightened up, ignoring the damp, foul-smelling clothes clinging to my skin, and started walking toward the nearest bus stop. As soon as I stepped onto the bus, I felt the stares. People wrinkled their noses, some even scooting away from me as if I were carrying the plague. The bus driver glanced at me in the rear-view mirror and sighed heavily. "Miss, I'd appreciate it if you caught another bus. You're disturbing the other passengers." My heart sank. The humiliation stung worse than the slap I had. Nodding slightly, I stepped off the bus, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me until the doors closed behind me. I decided to hail a cab instead, hoping for better luck. But every driver who stopped took one look at me, then the smell, and drove off without a word. The rejection was relentless. After the third cab zoomed off, I wrapped my coat tightly around myself, blocking the worst of the smell, and started walking. By the time I finally made it to my apartment, my feet were sore, my muscles aching, and I was shivering uncontrollably. It was late, and I could barely stand, but I knew I didn't have the luxury of rest. I still had a night shift at the bar to get to. I rushed into the bathroom, peeling off the filthy clothes as fast as I could. The hot water stung against my cold skin, but it was a relief nonetheless. I scrubbed myself clean, trying to wash away not just the smell, but the bitterness of the entire day. Once I was done, I dressed in my usual black jeans and a crop top, my work uniform of sorts. I grabbed a jacket, checking the time. I was running late, but I could still make it if I hurried. I called for a taxi, and this time, thankfully, one stopped for me. When the taxi finally pulled up to the bar, I exhaled in relief. I fumbled in my pocket, quickly paying the driver before dashing out, ignoring the slight ache in my feet. I was already late, in Andalusia, and I couldn't afford to lose this job, not with everything that had happened today. I pushed the door open, the familiar low hum of chatter and clinking glasses greeting me as I stepped inside. Before I could even take a breath, my boss's voice cut through the noise, sharp and unforgiving. "This isn't your father's business, Miss Clara, for you to show up whenever you feel like it," he snapped, his face a mixture of annoyance and anger. He stood behind the bar, arms crossed, glaring at me as if I had personally insulted him. I'm sorry,
Save it.
He waved his hand dismissively, not bothering to hear my excuse. 200 is off from your pay this week. I opened my mouth to protest, to explain, but he didn't give me a chance. He thrust a tray full of beer glasses toward me, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim.
Take that to table 16,
he barked before turning his back on me. I nodded, biting my tongue as I grabbed the tray. The weight of it was heavier than I expected, and I had to adjust my grip, trying to balance the glasses as I made my way across the crowded bar. My feet were still sore, and I could feel the exhaustion creeping in, but I kept my head down, focusing on the task at hand. I could see table 16 in the distance, a group of rowdy men laughing loudly, their voices carrying over the other conversations. But just as I got closer, I felt my foot catch on something. A chair leg, or maybe the edge of a rug. I wasn't sure. My heart skipped a beat as I stumbled forward, the tray tipping precariously. Before I could regain my balance, everything went flying. Glasses shattered against the floor, beer splashing everywhere, drenching the men at the table. A chorus of gasps and curses erupted as the men jumped up, beer dripping from their shirts and faces. One of the men, a tall, muscular guy with tattoos snaking up his arms, glared at me, his face twisted in anger.
"What the hell?"
he shouted, brushing beer off his leather jacket. His friends quickly followed suit, each of them staring at me as if I'd just committed an unforgivable crime. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, dropping to my knees to pick up the broken glass. My hands shook as I tried to gather the pieces, the sharp edges digging into my fingers. The sting of a cut on my palm was nothing compared to the humiliation washing over me in waves. The guy grabbed me by the arm, his grip like iron, yanking me to my feet as if I weighed nothing. His dark eyes blazed with fury, the intensity in them making my heart pound in my chest.
"This isn't over,"
he growled, dragging me toward his table despite my attempts to pull away. He was too big, too strong, and I was no match for him. Panic surged through me, irritation mixing with the fear crawling up my spine. "Let go of me," I snapped, my voice trembling as I tried to wrestle my arm free. But his grip only tightened. My hand instinctively tightened around the shard of glass I'd picked up earlier, my knuckles turning white. Without thinking, I jabbed it into his thigh, hoping the shock or pain would force him to release me. But he didn't even flinch. I looked up at him, my breath hitching in my throat, eyes wide with disbelief. How could he not feel that? The anger in his eyes only deepened, his face twisting into something darker, more menacing, a storm brewing beneath the surface. My pulse raced as fear wrapped itself around my chest, tightening with each passing second. I glanced around the bar, searching desperately for help. My eyes landed on a few of the other customers, but they barely spared us a second glance. They had turned back to their drinks, laughing and talking as if nothing unusual was happening. Watching a defenseless woman get manhandled in the middle of a bar seemed like a regular occurrence to them.
"No one's coming to help you, sweetheart,"
he said, his voice dripping with malice. His hand shot up, grabbing a fistful of my hair, yanking hard enough to make me cry out. Pain shot through my scalp, tears stinging my eyes.
"Come on, bitch,"
he snarled, leaning close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "You're gonna pay for this." I whimpered, my voice barely audible through the lump in my throat. "I told you I'm sorry. It wasn't intentional." Before I could say more, a deep, hoarse voice cut through the noise of the bar. "Let her go." My heart skipped a beat as I strained to see who had spoken, but the man gripping me didn't even glance up. His grip on my hair tightened, and his sneer deepened.
"Don't get into my business, Joe,"
he barked, his tone laced with warning as he tightened his grip on my hair. I clenched my jaw against the pain, biting back another cry. The voice from behind cut through the tension again, this time with an edge that was impossible to ignore. "You either let her go, or I'll make you, And believe me, I'd enjoy every second of it. There was a brief pause from my captor. With a low growl, he finally released me, letting me drop to the floor. The impact stung, but the relief of being free from his grasp was far more overwhelming. Before I could catch my breath, my boss stormed over. He didn't spare me a glance as he grabbed my arm forcefully, his fingers digging into my skin. "You need to come with me," he barked, his face twisted in anger. He didn't wait for a response, dragging me toward the door and straight outside. We stepped into the chilly night, and before I could catch my breath, he shoved my belongings into my arms, my bag and jacket. "I don't ever want to see your face around my bar again," he snarled, his voice thick with fury. I stood there, stunned, my heart racing as he turned to the security guard standing by the door. "Make sure she doesn't get back inside," he ordered. "She's done." Without another glance, my boss headed back inside, the door slamming shut behind him. I made my way back to my tiny apartment, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, humiliation, fear. The moment I stepped inside, I collapsed onto my couch, my body sinking into the cushions as a bitter laugh escaped my lips. The sound was hollow, empty, and before I knew it, that laugh turned into a painful cry. Tears streamed down my face as the reality of the night hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything I'd been holding in, the frustration, the fear, the humiliation, all came pouring out. For a few moments, I let myself cry, feeling the release of it, the rawness of the emotions I'd tried so hard to hold back. Eventually, the sobs subsided, and I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. My chest still ached, but the tears had brought some form of clarity. I got up from the couch and headed into the small bathroom, turning on the faucet to wash the blood off my hands. The cut from earlier stung as I rinsed it with water, and I winced, grabbing a small first aid kit from under the sink. With a shaky breath, I disinfected the wound and wrapped it in a bandage. As I headed into my bedroom, I started undressing, ready to put on my pajamas and call it a night. But as I stood naked in front of the mirror, something shifted in me, an idea sparked. My gaze drifted to the closet, landing on the black, tight dress my best friend Kevin had bought me for my 18th birthday. I'd never worn it, always thinking it was too bold, too daring for me. But tonight felt different. I pulled the dress out of the closet and slipped it on, surprised by how perfectly it fit even after 8 years. The fabric hugged my curves, and I stared at my reflection, seeing someone I didn't fully recognize. Someone stronger, more confident, more determined. I did some quick touches on my face, running my fingers through my hair and smoothing out the tangles. A smile tugged at the corner of my lips, the weight of the night lifting ever so slightly. With a small, satisfied nod, I grabbed a bag from my dresser, adding my wallet, a paper spray, and my phone before slipping it over my shoulder. One last look in the mirror, and I was ready. I reached the entrance of one of the largest and most prestigious clubs in town. The neon lights above glowed brightly, illuminating the line of people waiting to get in. Music pulsed from inside, and I could feel the bass reverberating in my chest, even from where I stood. The bouncers, clad in all black, were imposing, standing tall with their arms crossed, scanning the crowd with hawk-like precision. I paused at the entrance, staring up at the grand front, taking in the energy of the place. A nervous flutter danced in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. Tonight wasn't about humiliation, fear, or hesitation. It was about doing something for me. For once. Something bold. I let out a heavy breath, gathering my courage, and took a step forward. As I approached the door, one of the bouncers sized me up, his eyes lingering on my tight black dress. For a moment, I thought he might turn me away, but instead, he gave me a curt nod, opening the velvet rope to let me through without a word. The instant I stepped inside, I was hit by the intense sound of music, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and alcohol. Bodies moved rhythmically on the dance floor under the shifting, colorful lights, a sea of people lost in the music, the night, and each other. I stood there for a second, taking it all in. The energy, the atmosphere, the intoxicating freedom of it all. A small smile tugged at my lips as I took my first step forward into the crowd, ready to leave the weight of the world outside those doors behind. This was my night.